So everywhere I look at the left now, particularly in Britain, Western Europe and the US, I think they are having an incredibly destructive impact on ordinary people's lives.
Yeah.
Which is why, I still call myself left-wing, but I'm constantly conscious of the fact that to most people out there, perfectly understandably, they think that means I'm on the wrong side. So maybe I'm fighting a losing battle because I'm trying to recover a sense of what the left used to be.
Yeah.
What proved to me that the left is on the wrong side these days was Brexit. So in last year, 2016, 17.4 million British people, the largest number of British people that have ever voted for anything in history, voted against the European Union and for greater sovereignty, greater popular sovereignty, greater democratic control against the EU, which is an institution which is illiberal, undemocratic, and also racist. It has a two-tier immigration policy which allows freedom of movement for largely white Europeans, while at the same time paying African dictators to keep their people out of Europe. So this is an institution that I'm absolutely alarmed that anyone who calls themselves liberal or left-wing could support this vast Byzantine bureaucracy. Ordinary people, 17.4 million of them, defied the advice of the establishment. Pretty much the entire establishment was on their knees begging us to vote to stay in the European Union. They defied the establishment, they voted against this bureaucracy, and they voted by implication and sometimes explicitly in what they said to pollsters, they voted for independence, for more control over their lives, for less bureaucracy in their lives.
Right.
It was an incredibly positive moment in British history. In my view, it's the best thing that's happened in Britain in 25 years, politically speaking.
And it was framed as if it was some sort of racist,
it was framed, so what you have is the left instantly denounced it as racist, xenophobic, a new form of fascism. You people have been hoodwinked by demagogues. You don't know what you're doing. You're low information. This was the term they used, low information voters. Idiots, imbeciles, you stupid people, how could you do this? There are many nails in the coffin of the left. I think their failure to understand the positive progressive component of Brexit might prove to be the final nail. Because that was a very clear instance of people doing the things that people like us would like them to do, which is take a stand against bureaucracy and speak for yourself. Be self-governing. Desire to be in control of your own life. That positive, wonderful Enlightenment idea, which informed the left for at least 100 years after the Enlightenment, and then bit by bit they kind of lost sight of it. That's what Brexit represented, and the left's response was to call us, because I voted for Brexit, was to call us fascists. That is the worst abdication of the left's historic responsibility that I can remember. It's particularly pronounced in the campus culture wars, where those who defend freedom of speech most vociferously on campus are the ones who are called fascists, which is a complete reversal of what fascism is. I was in Warsaw a few weeks ago at the Museum of the History of the Jews in Poland, which is a terrible history. And what was amazing is that there's this whole room devoted to the Warsaw Ghetto, where the Jews were piled in before they were all exterminated. And what's amazing is that in the Warsaw Ghetto, they had no free speech rights. None whatsoever. The fascists, the Nazis denied them any free speech rights. And yet, these underground networks developed, and magazines and newspapers emerged like mushrooms after the rain, in the words of one of these people in the Warsaw Ghetto. Risk of death. They published their own magazines, they published their own newspapers in bunkers, they stored them under floorboards, they secretly sold them on the street, and they could be shot on the spot for doing this. My view is that anti-fascism is freedom of speech. That's what it is in its entirety. Fascism is censorship. So when I hear all these anti-fa people and all these anti-fascists going around demanding the censorship of people they don't like, demanding the censorship of people who they find difficult or uncomfortable, they are behaving far more like fascists. They are behaving far more like the rulers of the Warsaw Ghetto who forbade Jews from publishing magazines and newspapers than they are like anti-fascists. And in my mind, anti-fascism, by which I mean largely the left, the left was a great warrior against fascism, was entirely about defending freedom, and it was primarily about defending freedom of thought and freedom of speech. My view of Antifa is that it is absolutely the most ridiculous movement I can think of. It is obscene, in fact, because they present themselves as being in the lineage of people like George Orwell.
Right.
George Orwell left his incredibly comfortable life in Britain to go to Spain and fight physically against fascists and risk death. Antifa right now is actually a very bourgeois, anti-working class, anti-democratic movement which thinks being an anti-fascist means getting an Uber into town and punching a working class Trump voter in the face. That is incomparable to what the international brigades did in Spain, or to what anti-fascists did in Greece during the Second World War, or to what German citizens did who secretly plotted and acted against the Nazis. For them to compare themselves to genuine anti-fascists in 20th century Europe is outrageous, in fact. This is a censorious, snobby, paternalistic, ridiculous bourgeois movement which has completely lost sight of what it means to be left-wing and completely lost sight of what it means to be anti-fascist, to the extent that they behave far more like fascists than they do anti-fascists. They are censorious, they burn things down that they find offensive, they agitate constantly to shut down meetings, they heckle people so they cannot be heard. You know who they remind me of? One of the greatest things ever written about freedom of speech was titled A Plea for Free Speech by Frederick Douglass. Former slave, of course, become abolitionist, one of my favorite figures from American history. He took part in an abolitionist meeting in Boston, and it was shut down by hecklers, pro-slavery hecklers who invaded this meeting and prevented it from taking place. Frederick Douglass was so shocked by this that he wrote A Plea for Free Speech, in which he said free speech is the most important freedom in the world, and it's the freedom that makes tyrannies tremble. It's the freedom that puts government on the back foot. It's the freedom that keeps you as a citizen free and active and puts authority back in the closet where they belong, away from us. And that was an argument against the kind of thing that Antifa is doing, which is invading meetings, preventing them from taking place, a very informal, mob-like form of censorship. So that's what they remind me of from history. They remind me of these right-wing, borderline fascistic, very questionable agitators who hated the idea of people having freedom, who hated the idea of people speaking freely and listening freely. So the idea that Antifa is in any way progressive or liberal or decent is a joke.
Yeah.